Yeah, I'll be doing not much of anything. I'm going to be chillaxing. This is like my last weekend to goof off before we move. So then the packing fun starts next weekend.
Yeah, I was looking at the calendar to see when the moving part happens. How many days are you guys anticipating the drive will take?
I want to say it's 30. So when you do Google Maps, it's 30 hours of driving is what they
Mm,
quote. But of course, in a U-Haul, I'm tacking on like 20%. I'm thinking like
yeah,
36 hours worth of driving. So 36 hours I can do in 4 days easy, but I
yeah.
may, yeah, and we don't have any urge to rush it.
Mm.
There's like two routes you can take across the U.S. here.
You can always stop in Vegas.
Well, there's a trick to that. Yeah, so if I go,
He's like, I've looked.
yes, oh, you did. Let's see. So we
When
will
you're going to
go.
drive all that way, you might as well get your favorite pizza.
Okay, that's true. Petco Park, San Diego. So if we go from there to here, so home, and then throw in the directions across. So you're talking like 31 hours worth of driving if you go across this way. But you're going through the mountains, which if you're not driving a U-Haul is enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah. It's the
So
more interesting route, but the U-Haul's a problem.
yeah, so we're going to take this one down here. 32 hours instead is what they quote, and unfortunately not Las Vegas.
Just a little bump up.
Yeah, you're gonna hit 120 degrees in Phoenix.
You know, if at New Mexico you just cut across, you're good.
Yeah, if there's like some kind of road we can snake through up
Yeah,
here.
look at the yellow thing. It goes like basically there. You just go right across. Just improvise the rest, and boom, you're done.
And we'll have supplies with us. I mean, I have an entire U-Haul, obviously.
Yeah.
So.
Like, what's the
Are,
worst that could happen?
are you towing cars too? You have a car behind the U-Haul?
No, we ended up. So that was a really interesting point of discussion. We should get rid of our car in Chicago. We should just get rid of it, and then she can ride with me in the U-Haul cab the whole way down, and we get along well on car trips. We have an easy time with that. Now, she doesn't want to drive the U-Haul, mind you. She'd just be there for moral support and
Yeah.
be the
Directions.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep going.
You're going too fast.
Faster,
You're going too
slower.
slow.
Get in your lane.
Jesus, this road is long. Uh, so I was all in favor of that, but the reality is we're not going to get anywhere near what the car is worth. We've owned it for like 7 years now, and nobody's going to buy it for anything. It's got like door dings everywhere because we beat the hell out of it in downtown traffic. And it's like bulletproof, and Erica loves it. So we're like, okay, well, she can drive it, behind the U-Haul, in front of the U-Haul, whatever, at her own pace, and I'll drive the U-Haul. So.
Just the one car that you guys have? I mean,
Yep.
used to have way more.
I have a Jeep too, yeah.
Which one are we talking about?
Yeah, there was a matter of discussion there too. The Jeep we're leaving in Michigan at my dad's house, only because we only have one free parking spot in San Diego.
I was
We'd have to
wondering
pay for
about that.
extras. Yeah.
Why
And
not tow the car then and have her ride in the U-Haul? Just
Well,
doesn't want to?
Yeah, it's a 26-foot U-Haul, which is a giant pain in the rear to begin with. So we're like, it'll be easier if it's just one person stressing out in the U-Haul.
Do you have the option to tow it though? I mean, if she,
Yeah.
okay.
I've done it before.
Okay. Because she might, like, after a few hours, okay, I'm done.
I think we've done, what's the longest road trip we've done? She drove from Miami to Oklahoma City by herself, which is, I think, 2 days, either 2 days or 3 days.
Wow.
Where was AHA playing?
Yeah. She'll go anywhere for them.
It's true. It is true. All right, we'll go through y'all's technical questions. It feels so weird without Richie here. He's like the one bulletproof person who's always here, and he's moving today. He's packing up his entire house because they have to do plumbing repair. So
It's funny how like next week we all just have weird stuff. Next week's just like a company might go out of business.
Please don't say that.
call for support next week.
We're all gonna be dead. Everyone's dead.
That's true. Tara's gonna die on. It's gonna be like the Oregon Trail thing. I'm gonna die in some horrible U-Haul accident.
Richie will have a Florida thing.
It'll be great. Greg asks, how much vCPU ready time is too much?
Greg must be talking about a virtual machine.
Oh yeah, specifically VMware.
So if I recall correctly about CPU ready time, it's not something that you want to just look at once. It's something that you need to like look at over time. I forget all the details on it. I admit I'm a bad virtual DBA sometimes. I forget all like the ins and outs of every single metric like that. Maybe someone else remembers better.
I would just start with SOS scheduler yield. Is SQL Server actually waiting on CPU time, and how long is it waiting on CPU time? Because if SQL Server's not waiting on CPU, I don't really care that much about vCPU ready time. It can be other things inside your guests that are waiting for CPU time. And then what I just do is if I've got SQL or SOS scheduler yield weights inside a VM, I'm just going to go to the VM admin and go, hey, do you know what CPU ready time is? Can you show me that inside of vSphere? Can we look at it together? Oh, you see those huge spikes in the numbers? You know, does this mean anything to you? And they're like, oh, yeah, we overcommitted that host. We have 42 other guests on it. And just even having that discussion starts to help. But that's the only time I would go to them is first if I could prove it with SOS scheduler yield weights first. Steve asks, today I had to change a data type from Unicode string to decimal. Holy smokes. Oh, in the advanced editor of an Excel source within an SSIS package. Is there a way I can make a bunch of SSIS changes globally rather than one at a time? Oh, dude, have I got bad news for you. You're in the wrong webcast here.
Well, I might be able to give a clue, though. So at my last job, we had a lot of SSIS stuff, and when we were moving everything over to availability groups and multi-subnet failovers, we were trying to figure out, is there a way to modify all of the SSIS packages programmatically so that it wouldn't require so much, touching, manually making changes to each. Because we're having to swap out OLADB to ADO.NET. So anyway, the dev DBAs had figured out that BIML would provide a lot of help. So I suspect that BIML helps with this, BIML, and if you're using SSIS, you probably know about BIML already. So I would look into BIML and then maybe check out Andy Leonard.
Yes, up on the screen now. Andy's class on Expert SSIS actually has stuff on BIML inside of it, the BI markup language, which lets you generate your SSIS packages programmatically. Of course, it's kind of a start from scratch kind of thing, but if you're the kind of shop that needs to do that all the time. And I hate giving Steve that answer too, because Steve's like a good friend of ours and is with us all the time and client kind of thing. But yeah,
we just don't use that much SSIS ourselves.
And it's not that we have any negative feelings towards it. I'm like totally fine with it. Yeah, that's cool. It's just one of those things where as you get to become a database professional, like you start specializing in things. So I should ask that too. So as we were going through our careers, what did y'all decide to specialize in? What called to you inside of the SQL Server engine? Eric, what called to you as you were learning more about SQL Server?
Oh, I mean, the obviously the performance stuff, like anything involving query plans, optimizer, weirdness, that just popped right out at me immediately. At first, I thought I was going to be like, oh, well, I like ETL. I like getting this crazy file and then doing stuff to it, and it magically goes into SQL Server, and then people can do whatever they want with it. But that really got to a point where, like, I didn't want to start learning other languages, and every time I opened up SSIS, I cried. So like when Brent says we don't really have negative feelings towards SSIS, I can just say like this the first time I like dipped my toe in that water, I was like, no, like there were things and drawings and arrows, I just couldn't wrap my head around that. So I know that I invested a lot of time in it, but I just didn't. And then as things went on, and I got like past the ETL hump, and I like kind of like had like a stable enough process to deal with that, and I started like working on more reports and stuff. It would always come down to like, well, why is the report slow today, and other stuff, and other big questions like that got me more into the reporting into things.
Tara, how about you?
Well, I mean, my story is a little unique because I was just placed into a DBA role as a student worker, and I was just happy to get a full-time job, in IT right out of college, and I really enjoyed what I was doing, but my focus for what I like has always been performance tuning, and then a few years later when I got into HADR topics, so those are the areas that I really enjoy. They aren't necessarily what got me into it because I was just placed in the job.
Here you go. Yeah, I'd say to anybody watching there's so many good careers in SQL Server. There's so many things that you could specialize in. Whatever you choose to specialize in, the deeper that you know, the better off you'll do. Next up, Joseph asks, are there any good suggestions for resources on creating an always-on availability group farm, as in lots of instances on 2 servers running SQL Server 2014 Enterprise? And I think by instances he just means a bunch of AG listeners. I don't think he means a bunch of SQL servers. God, I'm an optimist.
No, you use that word instance, and it's a instance installation, and my answer is stop. Do not keep going with this. 2 servers, I would have no more than 2 instances, 1 instance per server.
And if you mean listeners, then we feel differently. But yeah, it's in terms of instances, we have kind of passionate feelings against them. Bill writes a question, and it's like 16 paragraphs long. So, Bill, you'll want to go ahead and paste that over at dba.stackexchange.com. I'll put that site up here so that you can see it. Over at dba.stackexchange.com, you can ask all kinds of long questions. So that's a great place to go and post your longer ones. I was just on there earlier today answering one about how do I do 3-part naming in a stored procedure in Azure SQL DB. And I'm like, ooh, that's an Azure question I can answer. You can't do that.
The answer's no.
Oh, goodness, Joseph. Oh, Joseph follows up with his availability group thing, and he says his boss is requiring it as multiple instances, not listeners. Oh, Joseph.
Yeah, that's just going to crash and burn. I wouldn't do that at all ever to anyone. Like I don't care who. Like, just no. Sure, if you want me to technically implement this, yes, but I'm not supporting it because as soon as anyone does anything on this, it is going to be awful. There are a lot of words I left out of that sentence.
Yeah. Virtualize and just create smaller VMs for each instance. I mean, I get you're using Enterprise Edition, so you just want to stack everything onto it, but just create smaller VMs. Just split your licenses across.
And then, with for Enterprise Edition, if you license at the host level, you can spin up as many Enterprise instances as you want on there. So really, the ball is in a better court when you do that, both from resource partitioning, licensing, all sorts of stuff. That I would much rather go with lots of VMs than 2 monolithic instances full of just arguing availability groups.
Nice flexibility on patching, on outage windows. You can do different ones for each VM instead of trying to patch an entire cluster at once.
Yeah. No, you can have different people on different hosts, some affinity rules so that people aren't stacked up all too much on one host over another. I mean, putting everything on one box is just not going to be a happy place for anyone, anywhere, any.
Joseph follows up with, okay, thanks, you guys. And I get the feeling it's a really short response, as in, okay, yeah, whatever, I'm screwed. No, so here's what you do, Joseph. We've played this game so many times with managers. Here's how you run it, is you email help@brentozar.com, and you copy your boss, and you ask it in the most politically polite way possible, and we'll remember who you are from office hours, and we'll give you all of the answers that we go, well, we would never do that in production. Here's why. Never's probably a strong word, but I would do it if there was $1 million on the other end of the line, sure, as long as I didn't have to support it.
And just be aware, our replies may not be politically correct, though.
What are you effing stupid? What kind of? And if you don't like your manager, just send us a separate email first, going, I don't really like this guy, and then we'll really just lay on the F-bombs and all kinds of stuff.
I have a folder of GIFs just for bosses.
Yes. Bill says, do y'all know if the Azure managed instances can run reporting services, or do you still have to run reporting services in your own Azure VMs?
Ooh, I don't know.
I do and you can't. Nope.
Oh, all right. Well,
SSRS is in this weird life cycle thing here right now where it's kind of hovering around, and they're like, it has a separate installer and you can do it on Linux or whatever, but they don't really have a cloud story for it right now. It's not that it's a bad product, it's just kind of in a weird spot right now. And so they just announced that Power BI, the Power BI reporting server and the stuff up in the cloud, now starts to have SSRS functionality. So I'm like, man, this is just a weird time to be in SSRS.
Yeah, everything about SSRS sounds like end of life.
A friend of mine said to work for a company, he's like, SSRS is like the store brand spaghetti sauce. You get it because it's cheap and it's on sale and it works, but it's not like when family comes over or other people come over, you really want to serve them the store-bought spaghetti sauce. You want to like put your own tomatoes in there or something like that in order to make it taste better. It's okay, that works. Mike asks, when I'm changing fill factor on a whole lot of indexes from 10% up to 80%, what should we consider, i.e. transaction log size, plan cache, etc.?
I want to know how you got to 10%. Was that just a mistake? You're supposed to be 90%? I mean, we've had clients in this situation before. It's like, do you know that your pages are mostly empty?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I don't think I'd be terribly worried about the plan cache. I think making that change is a far more important one performance-wise than maintaining the plan cache there. Transaction log size is going to be interesting, especially if you have any HA or DR technologies in there like availability groups or mirroring or log shipping. I'd also be really mindful of locking. You may not be able to get this all done in one go. You know, if you just have a standalone instance, this might be one of those, we're going to switch into simple recovery maintenance windows, flip that stuff over, do your changes, and then flip stuff back to full. I don't know. That's what I would be. That was the first thing that I would start looking at.
And if you're Enterprise Edition, which a lot of people aren't, but if you are, do the online equals on option so that the existing index stays online. That's if you care, for production to continue while this maintenance window is occurring.
Yeah. I would want to time that too on a dev instance just so I know what I'm in for.
And then just make sure you have enough free space in the transaction log for the largest index. So if your largest index is say 100 gigabytes, that you have at least 100 gigabyte file size, your transaction log file size. I'd want to make sure I have like 150 or so, but it's around 100% of the size of your largest index.
Yeah, I want to think about sorting in TempDB too on that when we're talking about options.
Mm.
I like that. I was going to say too, the thing that always gets me is even if I'm not allowed to put them in simple recovery model. See, I said model, Tara. I said
you
I got
did,
it right.
Yay.
if they still have to be in full recovery model, then you got to do transaction log backups frequently. Like don't
every minute.
With your Bill says, okay, forget my last really long question.
I liked his question too. I was going to summarize it because I did read the whole thing.
Really? What was the? You want to summarize it and answer it?
Sure. So they were using log shipping, didn't have a whole lot of issues. They're using it as a warm backup. They rarely had a problem. They run SQL Server 2005. They moved over to availability groups in SQL Server 2012 and started having some issues. There were some hiccups in the application when failovers would occur, and just wants to know, should we move back to where we weren't having issues? What's the is there a learning curve to availability groups? Sure, there's a learning curve to availability groups, but you can't really compare the two environments that you had because log shipping has no automatic failovers. What you probably is happening, either the manual or automatic failovers, you're doing a failover, and that the databases go through crash recovery. So the databases are not available when this occurs. Same thing would have happened with log shipping, but it would have been a very manual step, would have taken longer, and your applications would have had hiccups too. You went from a disaster recovery technology to a high availability technology. You can't really compare your two environments. You're not using them the same. Both of them are susceptible to latency. His information indicated that they had the secondary get a lot out of sync with availability groups. Same thing was happening on log shipping. You just weren't monitoring it, I bet. And it would probably be even worse there because there's a delay. You're waiting for the log backup to occur, the copy to occur, the restore log to occur. Whereas availability groups, it's always happening. Asynchronously, it's happening at a much lower level than the file level that log shipping happens at. So log shipping would have had way more latency than availability groups, at least from what I've seen. As far as learning curve, sure, big learning curve. We do recommend, training, at least 2 DBAs. You don't have to be a DBA to support this, but clustering knowledge is very, very helpful. Making sure you have a staging environment. I like availability groups. It's just, what are you trying to achieve? Do you just need a warm standby? Use availability groups and have it be asynchronous, and then it kind of acts like log shipping, and there's going to be manual steps to do those failovers. But if you're wanting high availability, to reboot a node or do patching or whatever, and just a quick downtime for the application, the hiccups are going to be normal. That's what occurs when you do a failover, and same thing with log shipping.
And if you feel like you've bit off more than you can chew with the availability groups, you can always switch to me and Brent's favorite setup, which is the failover cluster plus log shipping. Because then you get the HA from the failover cluster and you get DR with the log shipping, and you don't get all of the headaches of the AG.
The classic two-piece suit of high availability and disaster recovery. Pablo says, when I look at the plan cache, is there a way I can tell who executed those queries without starting an audit of some kind?
I'm gonna answer in Spanish. No.
Niet in Russian.
Nein in German.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, the plan cache doesn't keep that kind of information around. You would have to either audit it or just, run SP who is active or SP blitz who, log that. You can log that to a table, get a monitoring tool, one of those things to make sure you have make sure you collect that information when queries run. You could probably do it with extended events, but I would be hesitant to want to collect that stuff with extended events just because usually when you set up that kind of session, you're looking at collecting like the SQL text or the query plan or something like that, and collecting that stuff with extended events is just a nasty, nasty, angry, just woke up from hibernation bear and wants to treat you like a salmon in a warm stream.
And the other thing I'd ask is why you want to do it. If you're doing it for audit purposes, like you want to know who broke something, if you're looking for inserts, updates, and deletes, you could use transaction log reader utilities. Those are not easy or straightforward. They're kind of a pain in the rear in order to use. If you have control over the query, like over the stored procedure, I love putting a line to log it to a table, just like inside the stored procedure, put in an insert into a table with the person who called it, the time they called it, etc.
Yeah, like if it's write queries, you can do that with the trigger. If it's just read queries, you're in a little bit of different place though.
Yeah. Drew says, I'm having some issues with SQL Server backups, and then he goes on for 4 paragraphs. Okay, hold on a second. Let me see if I can spin this in a new window. Holy cow, Drew. He says, I have an error. He's in a... Oh, God. Oh. All right, so I have to read this out loud for posterity now because it's interesting. Drew says, I'm having some issues with SQL Server backups, which are being written to a share on an AWS appliance from an EC2 SQL server. This is like there's a Rube Goldberg OK Go music video going on here. I'm consistently getting the same error in the SQL Server event log for 2 of my SQL Server instances, saying that they failed to write to a backup device, i.e. an unexpected network error occurs. Welcome to the cloud. You should expect writes to fail from time to time in the cloud, especially going across a network share. What I would probably do is, and this is a terrible thing, is I would try to find the most reliable file path that you can, whether it's a Windows server, whether you do it locally, whatever. But then after the writes finish, as soon as they finish, then you sync the file somewhere else. And I would also say, just to be paranoid, do your log backups pretty much continuously, but get them off the box as quickly as possible, even while you're doing the fulls. Because a half hour long, 2 hours, you're saying 2 hours into your backup, 2 hours into the backup fails, you're going to miss your RPO and RTO by a mile.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next up we have Katie says, Katie, we're looking to move some databases into an availability group.
I like these people.
I right? Yeah,
it's a good day. No replication questions, all availability groups.
Oh, don't jinx us now. And all the replication questions happen when you... Katie says, we were hoping we could speed things up by using log shipping and then adding the databases into the availability group. Does this seem logical, or are there better methods?
Yeah, definitely. Although I think it just adds too much complexity having to set up yet another tool just to get the availability group synced. So I just do it manually. And I just went through this exercise on Monday with a client. So a client hired us for consulting hours rather than our critical care. And so I was helping them set up. It was database mirroring, but same thing. And starting with the full backups from last night, rolling through all the transaction logs. So I have a handy script to do that. You can use log shipping, but there's scripts out there to roll through the logs. We also have the SP restore, whatever the name of that store procedure is, in the first responder kit that can help with that. And as long as your files are named in such a way that sorted alphabetically in, say, Windows Explorer, they're in the right order, that script would work. It assumes Ola Hallengren naming convention, but any convention, as long as they're sorted out, once sorted alphabetically, they're in the right order, that script would help you. I had another script in my toolbox, so I was using that, and this client had the weekday name in the file name. So Monday was coming before Sunday, so I had to manually move commands around, which was annoying, but sure, you could use log shipping. I just think it just complicates things by having to have another tool in there.
And if you're on 2017, something kind of cool came out this week. So I'm going to go to SQLServerUpdates.com, which is where we post the most recent updates. No, I lied to you. I said 2017. It's 2016. So in 2016, there is a brand new improvement in the latest CUs where you can automatically seed replicas. You can change this setting so that as you add databases to an existing availability group, SQL Server will automatically do direct seeding to other replicas. There's a gotcha. That one, as I'm remembering as I say it out loud, it was distributed availability groups only, which makes me want to give it the finger, but yeah, whatever.
Well, Katie brings up another point. It says she has a couple terabytes of data, and she's trying to minimize downtime. So when I've had to do this in the past, when I did large data migrations, I set up mirroring because it was just like an easy, like one-way ticket. You know, I put it in asynchronous mode up until I was ready to go live. So flip it to synchronous and then do the failover. Then I had a pretty easy time with it. I know Tara doesn't like it because it's too complicated, but for me,
database mirroring I will use. Log shipping is just not a fan.
It's so bulletproof.
I mean, the situation still exists. You still have to get it into apply the last transaction log, and so that's the challenge, especially when you're talking about a couple of terabytes of data. Now, if we're talking about say 1 or 2 databases, I'm probably going to switch my method and not use full backups, so that I can get the data over quicker, scan snapshots, restore that, and then apply. I mean, you could do that, right, with the no recovery and apply a transaction log chain. So I'd probably be looking into other methods if I'm talking about a lot of data. But if it's a lot of databases, then yeah, that's not really going to help.
For the really big ones, I had the easiest time by using a full and a diff and then going over there. And the full and the diff combo usually got me to a close enough LSN where mirroring was like, cool, we can party.
Yeah. I had a 7 terabyte database that I would have to mirror, and occasionally there would be issues, and we'd have to start it over again. And we went from San Diego to Las Vegas for primary and disaster recovery, and the network wasn't fast enough to transfer the backup file. Even with compression, the backup file was just too long, and the backup retention wasn't long enough. So by the time that I was ready to start applying transaction logs, they were gone. There was no, I mean, they'd already been deleted from production. And I couldn't change that for legal reasons. We had some, anyways, legal reasons. And so we occasionally had some employees traveling to Las Vegas, and so we'd send a tape. We'd fly a tape with them, and so they would hand deliver that, and that would allow us to catch up. It was funny. Flying is faster.
Oh, that's good.
Katie follows up with she has 4 nodes in her availability group, so she wanted to do log shipping to get all 4 of them into quick succession in versus mirroring, which restricts me to only 1 node. Makes sense.
Gotcha.
Bill says, since you can't use the use command in Azure SQL DB, how do you modify scripts that get a list of databases and look at something on each database? Well, Bill, as soon as you figure that out, let us know, because that's one of the big reasons why things like SP Blitz don't work in Azure SQL DB. Wah, wah, wah.
Sadness.
Yeah, I wish that we had that capability. I wish we could get There's 2 things that really kill me about Azure SQL DB: the inability to have the use command, and the inability to do 3-part naming. As in database, schema, table. Those 2 things are just so huge. So yeah, it's nothing. We don't want to get these scripts to be compatible. We just don't have clients using Azure SQL DB. So we leave every time someone comes in from the community and they're like, "Hey, can you make this work in Azure SQL DB?" I'm like, you're using Azure SQL DB, you say. Why don't you make them work? Well, that's too hard. Exactly. There you go.
It's not any easier for us. We have access to the same stuff you do.
No. We are big fans of getting it to work in managed instances. We immediately, as soon as managed instances came out, we were like, going through all the scripts to make sure that they work. But those are much easier.
Yeah, well, those just don't have the limitations. Like, you can have the use command. You can cycle through all the databases on a managed instance. Otherwise, like, if we could do that everywhere, we would just do that everywhere.
Piece of cake. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us this week at Office Hours, and we will see y'all next week. Adios.